What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run a 5-week program at the Inner Knowing School for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals, a number of practical tools and frameworks for creating an intuition practice and for self mastery. You can find more at theinnerknowingschool.com. I have a master's certification in intuition medicine, and I've condensed 10 plus years of experience and research navigating how to harness your energy and intuition in an easy to access live curated course. Now, as someone who's helped countless creatives, entrepreneurs, and many who are just plain stuck, open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I've seen this strategy transform people's inner states and external reality. And the best part is that you'll skyrocket your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly live to overcome your limiting beliefs and show you how to manage your energy instead of your time. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition based on some of the top tools and frameworks that I've developed. And you'll get access to guided meditations and visualizations not available anywhere else. This method is so effective that even if you don't have that much time, or if you think that you might not be ready, this will work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can check out what past clients had to say about the program. Wishing you all many blessings ahead. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Blood Moon Box, a monthly subscription box service for period pads and tampons to help support all humans who have a cycle for that time of the month, and no need to run to a store to mix and match period supplies that don't cater to the entire ebbs and flows of your cycle. There are 2 box options based on your cycle, light and medium, and then heavy. And in addition to the period products, you'll also receive PMS herbal teas, a candle, and some other items for your time of the month. You can reserve a box by navigating to bloodmoonbox.com. And bloodmoonbox.com is on a mission to destigmatize the idea of period blood. At Blood Moon Box, they believe that it is the time to honor the enchanting magic within every person who has a cycle. So join us in embracing the magic of your cycle with Blood Moon Box. Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Today's episode is about how to thrive in conflict and create a happy relationship with the Davon Method with Alicia Davon. And along with her husband, Erwan, they've become the go-to experts for those seeking a higher level of relationship support since 1995. And they're among the most experienced relationship coaches in the world and have taught throughout the United States and abroad. Both of them have advanced degrees in psychology, and they have developed a method that covers everything from sex to the mind to lifestyle design to how to get into and thrive throughout the stages of relationship from a feminine and a masculine perspective. They're based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they also come very highly recommended by my social circle. Alicia provides a high-end boutique service that gives her clients an effective way to enhance their relationships. So I'm really, really excited to welcome Alicia to the show. Welcome, Alicia.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So to kick it off, Alicia, what is kind of a common theme or pattern that you see when it comes to relationships right off the bat?
Well, the most common pattern is patterns themselves. We as human beings, of course, this happens kind of without us doing anything. We're conditioned by our upbringing, our relationships with our parents, our early relationship experiences, the culture, all of it. And then we come into romantic relationship with a type of filter, like sometimes people mention rose-colored glasses when you're like, wow, everything looks so great. But the glasses aren't necessarily rose-colored. They're my past's patterns colored, and we see the world through them. So I think that's the most common thing, is that either in the very beginning, certainly as the relationship goes on in time, our past patterns are coloring our view of the person and the relationship. And I can get more specific on that, but that's what comes to mind first when you ask that.
Yeah, that's so important that that we're filtering in our relationship what we've experienced in the past, and we're all coming to relationships with these specific filters. But I'd love to dive into maybe some of the themes of conflict in relationship that you've seen come up time and time again. Since you've been doing this for so long, I'm sure you've seen a lot of themes emerge in conflict style and conflict within relationship. But yeah, curious, and also how that may have changed since the pandemic.
Yeah. So there's some basic styles of communication and behaving and being in relationship, and many different people have kind of chopped them up into different categories. So I'll give a couple of examples. There's the attachment style theory, right? Attachment theory, attachment styles, which basically says that there are some people that approach their relationships in a more secure, quote unquote, healthy fashion. They're able to deal with conflict in a less reactive way, more open, more curious. Then there's people that tend to be more avoidant. They're, when conflict arises, or even before conflict arises, they're not there. They're not present, either emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever it is. They tend to vacate. And then there's people that tend to be kind of anxious, and those are those of us that might be more needy or scared or clingy or worried about the relationship. And, somewhere in there, aggression fits in. But those are different styles of how people approach relationship and conflict. And Erwan and I have created these categories that I'll name now, which are kind of meant to be a little bit funny, but they're also true. The three categories we have developed are the meanie, like mean, the softie, and the avoider, right? So this speaks to some people being meanies, being, their default when they feel threatened is to be aggressive, is to be blaming, is to be critical, is to have to be in control. Then there's softies that tend to be the people pleasers and the ones that give in and want everybody to get along, and they want to be liked. And of course, underneath, they're not very happy about that, but that's their coping mechanism, right? And then there's avoiders, which I already described, people that tend to, not really engage in relationship at all, or if they're in relationship, they tend to be the absent partner. So it's really useful to look at conflict and patterns through those types of lenses, because it explains a lot. And there's a lot of research that goes into why somebody would end up being a meanie or a softie or an avoider. And, I'll stop there to see if you have any comments or questions. We'll continue from there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in our modern culture, I love, by the way, these kind of categories: the meanie, the softie, the avoider. Because I think from the attachment style theory, for me at least, it felt almost like two kind of binary. Like there's the avoidant and then there's the anxious. I love that you've added this, I'd say, this category, which is, or this distinction between the meanie and the softie. And because I think I'm curious to understand what has created an environment for someone to become these types of categories, and how would you coach, or how would you coach a couple that is experiencing, let's say, the avoidant versus the avoider and the softie, or the softie and the meanie? I'm sure that there's probably a lot of styles that you see over time.
Yeah, there's some very common combinations, but I see all sorts of things, like it's very common for a meanie and a softie to get together, right? Because at the level of personality, they suit each other's purposes when they're in their their patterned identities, right? The meanie kind of gets to be the one in charge, and they get upset and they criticize and they control. And the softie's like, okay, okay, they sort of fit together like puzzle pieces. Of course, it's not true relating. It's relating through a pattern. But, we tend to see those types of things. But in terms of what would have somebody develop that kind of style, a lot of it is based on the relationship with their parents or whoever was their parenting figure. Sometimes we mimic one of our parents, so we see our mother or our father being critical and dominating and that kind of thing. And we think, okay, that's just how to be. We just act like that. As children, we're sponges. We just repeat that. And if there's not consciousness in the parenting, that'll just happen. It'll just happen. Sometimes we react against that. Oh, my mom or my dad, they were just so mean and controlling, and that was so hard for me. So I'm going to be like nice. I'm not going to be like my parent. And, somebody might learn to be an avoider by, they didn't see their parents be romantic together or attending to the relationship, or one parent was working all the time and an absent parent. So without even deciding or choosing, a person might end up being that way in relationship because it's comfortable and it's known. This all happens unconsciously.
Wow. And you mentioned that the avoidant oftentimes is not in a relationship, or maybe I just heard that.
Yes, no, you heard that correctly, because we work with both singles and couples, and we'll often find, this is unbelievably common, where a person will be saying, I really want a relationship. I'm single. I want to meet my soulmate. And then we'll start working with them. They'll either be in our mastery of relationship class, or we'll be coaching them or whatever. And we find this person is actively, usually unconsciously, but actively writing people off or avoiding doing things like going out, which you need to do to meet people, to date. It's very practical in that way. So we often find that even people that say they want relationship but are pushing it away tend to be avoiders. And then, of course, there's folks that just aren't even present that they want to be in a relationship. They're too busy working or involved in other activities. And I'm not making that wrong. I'm just saying that person might be an avoider in relationship, because as human beings, again, no right or wrong, but many of us are very much drawn to having a partner, or partners, or engaging intimately. It's like an urge we have. So when someone's not doing that, often there's some avoidant patterns in there.
Fascinating. Can you be in a healthy relationship if you exhibit these traits? If you're not secure and you have anxious, avoidant, or the way that you classify it, the meanie, the softie, the avoidant, can you be in a healthy relationship, let's say, having conscious awareness of these patterns, or not?
Oh, absolutely. We would all be in trouble if we couldn't be in a healthy relationship if we had some of these patterns, because we all have them. We just do. And that is part of the human experience. And so what you're saying, what you just said about having conscious awareness, if you have that, that is what creates a healthy relationship. Conscious awareness and the willingness to grow and develop. And there's certain antidotes to the patterns a meanie might have, or a softie might have, or an avoider might have. So if you're willing to learn, feel where these patterns have come from, be willing to call yourself on it or call your partner on it, and then consciously start to try other ways of being, that's a very healthy relationship. It's clean, it's transparent, even with the foibles and the issues and the patterns.
So where do you see the breakdown happening? Is it because one person in the relationship, or, both people for sure, but if someone's come to you and things don't work out, and I sort of am thinking about the Gottman Institute research, but if one person shuts down and the other person is open, is it still possible to have a healthy relationship?
It's a really good question. In terms of what we're defining as healthy, which when you give me that example, it kind of calls into question what's a healthy relationship, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, let's say, and I love the Gottmans, by the way. This is a fun fact. My childhood best friend is their niece. And so I don't know them personally, but I've been at bar and bat mitzvahs along with them and have known about them for years. And she worked in their lab for many years, my friend, their niece. And so I have a special place in my heart for their work, besides it being totally brilliant. And there are those ways that we can shut down or shut the person out. And, ultimately, if a healthy relationship means that there's openness, there's communication, there's a willingness to grow and develop. If one person's shut down and not open to that, that would not be what we're calling a healthy relationship. It doesn't mean you can't stay in it, but
Right.
it's not what I would call a healthy relationship.
What does it take to create a healthy relationship? Like, let's say a couple has come to you, and I'm curious, what are some of the kind of triggers or the catalysts that bring couples to you? Do they do it preemptively before maybe a snowball of conflict is emerging, or is it when things have kind of completely broken down, or is it kind of a mix of all those things?
It's a mix. Ideally, and more we see this happening, couples will either get together, like they'll meet in one of our classes, or one of them will be in it as a single, and then they meet someone and they've already witnessed, oh, wow, it's really important to bring awareness into the relationship from the start. Let me preemptively do this. So that's great when that happens, or a couple says things like, we're doing well. There's a couple we're working with now, and they're like, we're doing pretty well, but we're getting married in a few months and we want to make sure that we stay connected. And, that's a great time to add in some support for the relationship. And sometimes, though, couples come because there's a major issue. And sometimes they're in crisis, like we don't know if we're going to stay together. Other times it's just this point of contention. Like, for example, a couple, I won't say their names, obviously, or any identifying details, but I've been working with them for about a year, and they came to us. She came to me. I met her. It's funny. I met her at a playground. Our kids were both playing at the playground, and we got to chatting, and she's like, oh my God, we need this. And they weren't having much sex. They'd been together for many years. They had 3 kids, not much sex. And she was dissatisfied with that. She wanted more. So it wasn't like they were fighting, but there was definitely a disconnection. So in terms of what was happening with them, the way that I like to look at it, and the way we've been looking at it with them, is through the 5 parts of our method. I won't go too far into all of these because it would take forever, but we look at things psychologically. We also look at things, chemistry, masculine, feminine dynamic, how's their flirtatious relationship with each other? Is it there? Are they present to being the masculine and the feminine and romantic, or are they only present to being parents and logistical partners, right? Their lifestyle, how much time and space are they devoting to the relationship? And also sexual skill. Do they have it? Are there issues there? So with this particular couple, there was stuff going on with all of it. She was like, I want more sex. I want more sex. And then as they started moving towards that, she's like, oh my God, I have trauma. I'm pushing him away. I didn't realize this. So we're not trauma therapists, but many people unfortunately have past experiences that are difficult. So we've gotten to work with her on, dealing with some of those so she can be more available to sexual contact and being connected. Their lifestyle was wired up such that they were not spending any pleasure or quality time together. It's all about their kids and logistics and work. And we've helped them shift that and bring in certain skills to communicate with each other in a way that brings out the flirt and brings out the romance. So those are examples of things a couple might be dealing with.
Wow, fascinating. I want to dig into the feminine masculine dynamic, Can you say more about that and like where you've seen that breakdown happen in especially like longer relationships? And I'm also curious, this is a separate question, but following after this is what are some of the right ways to kind of look for that dynamic or create that dynamic early on in a new relationship?
Yeah, so this is a huge issue and a huge problem in many people's relationships, especially these days when, fortunately, there's a lot of awareness arising about masculinity, femininity, what's a healthy version, what's a toxic version, like where do people feel like they're just stuck in a role versus getting to be themselves. And it's really beautiful because people are getting to know their true selves and what they really want. Along with that, though, there is a negative, which is that some conversations go towards making femininity wrong or masculinity wrong, so that that nice surrender and receptivity and desire and appetite of the feminine person in the dynamic, or the strength or the assertiveness or the directiveness of the masculine person, that kind of gets thrown out, like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're moving away from making one gender or one expression of gender better or worse. But then the polarity and the difference between the two, between the masculine and the feminine, is disappearing. The difference between the two, things are getting too homogenized. And the biggest complaint that we get from couples or and singles really also is lack of polarity, of
Mm.
difference between the two. Lack of chemistry is how it shows up, like in this couple I was just talking about. And they're definitely the rule, not the exception these days, is, like there's not much turn on. And, I don't feel feminine. I don't feel masculine. I just feel like a neutral logistics partner with this person.
Wow.
Right. So that's a huge, very common problem that many people, because people are confused. I really feel for both men and women these days. Like we're both in a tough situation. Men often feel, single men, they're like, God, I can't even look at a woman without feeling like a perpetrator. And it's like, that's kind of sad. It's nice to notice a man looking at you and thinking you're attractive, obviously respectfully and consciously, but it's gone a little far, I think, where men are now feeling timid. And then women don't like that they're timid. So, like, nobody can win. And then, same with women, we're told, okay, be strong, be independent, be powerful. Awesome, right? Definitely, we can do that. But then a woman will often lose touch with that more kind of innate, inherent, natural softness and desire, roundness, that juiciness that's just part of who we are.
Right. Wow. So digging a little bit into this, like for someone who might be single listening to this, what is the right way to date in a new relationship? Let's say, obviously for a heterosexual couple, but for someone who, from the perspective of a woman and perspective of a man, I think a lot of people are very confused about how to show up and also how to assess people in long-term relationships, like especially in the beginning. What would you tell someone to look for?
Okay, so I'll start with what a single person might like to look for, whether they're a man or a woman, masculine or feminine. Okay, because these things apply to both, and then I'll get more granular with the masculine and the feminine. So my number one criteria that I give all of our students, I suggest to them, is to find somebody who's open to growing and developing as a person, who's like, that could look so many ways. Maybe they're into meditation, or they like to go to therapy, or they like to do classes like what we offer, or they're whatever it is, but they're authentically open to growing and developing. And that is so important, because even if a person's like hot and sexy and young and look good, and they've got all the like bank account, height, boobs, hair, whatever it is, right? When you first meet them and you're like, yeah. Like that doesn't have to disappear, by the way, but that's like the beginning novelty, and it's literally skin deep. And where the person's headed is more important than where they're going. Meaning, if they're on a path to growth and development, and again, they don't need to be perfect or over all their issues, but they're open, right? That's better, more valuable, gives the relationship a better chance to succeed. So that's the first thing. And then there's things like, you want to, these days, I mean, with apps and texting and everything, it's like there's this game going on where you have this great meeting or this great connection on the app, and then the person's gone, or you're texting them and then they take 3 days or something. I'm a big fan of like, just respond to the person and look for people that don't keep you waiting by the phone and aren't playing games, So there's those sorts of things where you can kind of tell if somebody is authentically interested or not. So those are blanket things for both. Now, in terms of the masculine and the feminine, the most attractive quality in the feminine, couple of qualities actually. A is to have a positive relationship to what you want. I call it your appetite, your desires. Often we doubt ourselves as women or the feminine, like, oh, is what I want too much? Or is this okay? Or I should defer? Or I don't know what I want. Having a positive relationship to what you want is inherently attractive. It gives the guy something to do, something to deliver on to make you happy. And the more he knows, the better. Now, that comes along with the second part, which is being willing to be friendly about it, positive, loving, right? Because some of us as women are really good at knowing what we want, but we can be a little demanding or critical. Some of us are like the nicest people ever, but we're beating around the bush and not saying what we want. So neither of them work with men. And then with men, the best thing that you can do is pay attention to her and to what she wants and be willing to be bold. Tentativeness doesn't really work in a romantic situation for a lot of reasons. We could have a whole conversation about that, but bold doesn't mean aggressive or bossy, but it means like, okay, good. Like, this is what you want. I'm going to take you there. And having that kind of attitude.
Fascinating. I really appreciate that, Alicia. I really, really appreciate that. I think that's true not just when you're starting to date but also true when you're in a relationship, right? I mean, I think that, like you said, that a woman knowing what she wants and having the masculine energy sort of perceive, witness, understand, learn, and then be bold about that. How does that play out? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, like for example, it could start from the very beginning. Let's say you're on an app. Okay, so by the way, I understand people use apps. That's fine. I'm still a huge fan of going out in person and going to social events. A lot of people hide behind the apps and then complain about them. So, go to meetup.com, go to Eventbrite, tell all your friends you're single and to invite you to their dinner parties. And, that is just what you need to do to meet people. It's really, this is off what you're asking. I'll be back to what you're asking in a minute, but it really is a numbers game amidst other things. But the more you go out, the more people you meet, the more likely it is you're going to meet someone. So, oh gosh, now I lost my train of thought. Okay, an example. So, for example, you may have connected as a woman with a guy. Let's say you met at some, dinner party that your friend was throwing, and then the guy says, "Oh, like what, would you like? Let's get together. What do you like to do?" As a woman, you wouldn't be like, "Oh, I don't know, like whatever. What? I'll do whatever. Why don't you pick?" Because it doesn't give him anything to work with. Now, if you're not sure what you want, you could say, why don't you give me a menu? a menu of 3 things that we could do, and I'll pick one. So that's telling him what you want. You don't know, but you want him to give you 3 options and you'll decide. Or maybe as a woman, like, I don't want to have my first date be this big, long sit down dinner. And he offers to take you out to dinner. You might say something like, oh, it sounds awesome to spend some time together. I know this great hike. I'd love to go hiking. Would you come hiking with me? So you're not shooting down his idea. You're not capitulating and just going along, but you're being enthusiastic, positive, and saying what you want. So that, and then if you're smart guy, you'll do that, unless like your leg's broken and you can't hike, in which case you'd make a counter offer, but that's an example of a first date situation.
Got it. Okay. I love it. This is fun. I think a lot of people are interested in how to relate, and I think the pandemic actually took out a lot of relationships, right? So there's a lot of people who are kind of newly single and have been asking these questions. So Alicia, I want to talk a little bit about things that you've seen in conflict, and I keep going back to conflict because I've done a lot of research when it comes to relationships, and I think the Gottmans talk about this as well. I'm curious to hear your point of view, which is relationships a lot of times can thrive, but what destroys them is the conflicts that they can't resolve. So I'm curious, what have you seen as resolvable and unresolvable, and how do you help people navigate through conflict in relationship?
Yes, a very important question, because inevitably there is going to be conflict, and it doesn't have to be, the kind of conflict where you're screaming at each other or something. But, this is what makes us human. I mean, any guy that I've ever met that I had way too much in common with and we were so similar, I never wanted to be with, because there was just no friction. And so it's important to be able to have conflict. Now, the Gottmans probably say this in their own way, but how you handle it and how you fight has everything to do with how it goes. And let me see, there's a lot of things I want to say at once. I'll start with this. There's certain things that we all have as non-negotiables in relationship. Like a very, very common one is, do you want kids or do you not want kids, right? Like, what kind of lifestyle do you want to lead? Those types of conflicts can be avoided if you're upfront in the beginning. So there's certain things like non-negotiables. You kind of want to find that out sooner than later. And I'm not saying on the first date, do you want to get married and have kids with me? No, that'll scare the person away. But making it clear, oh, I'm looking for a long-term relationship. Oh yeah, I'd love to have kids. How about you? Because you will know if the person's like, oh no, I want to travel and I wanted this, I wanted that, then okay, we're not a match. And that doesn't mean you can't have fun. Maybe you have a casual relationship for a while, but the mistake people make is like, okay, let me see if their mind changes. And if they fall in love with me, they'll change their mind. And then later that leads to a lot of conflict and resentment and disappointment. So that's one category, non-negotiables. How to deal with that is upfront or as soon as you know that you have a non-negotiable. The second thing would be conflicts around styles, like what we talked about, different communication styles, styles of being. One person tends to be loud and confrontational, and that's just sort of how their family was. And another person tends to be sort of understated and polite because they grew up in I'm thinking the first one is New York and the second one's the Midwest or something like that,
Or California.
Or California, right? I mean, Erwan and I, he's from New York City. He was born in Paris, grew up in New York City, and I grew up in LA. And my parents are amazing, wonderful people, and they didn't really fight. I can still remember the one argument they had, and it was so minor, and I was traumatized by it. And Erwan grew up in a very, dysfunctional situation, and there was plenty of conflict to go around, right? So when we came together, there was a lot of conflict because if he would raise an issue And in his mind, there was no, you know, aggression or meanness or anything. He was just bringing something up, assertively. I would experience that like, oh my God, the relationship's going to end. This is terrible. And I would like fall apart or run away or something. So for those types of interpersonal relational conflicts, getting support is really the best thing that you can do. Um, Having eyes outside of your heads and a presence in the relationship, whether it's a class or a therapist or a coach, that's your leverage there, because then you can learn and really start to see things from your partner's perspective and have them see it from yours. So there's compassion, and then you can learn communication skills to kind of deal with conflict. For example, Erwan and I have something we call couples counseling 101, which is when things start to get heated in any way, take a break. And the break can be 2 minutes while you both kind of collect yourselves. It could be half hour. It could be a day, but you agree upon it and give yourselves time to cool off. So that's how to deal with that kind of conflict. I'll stop there to see what clarifying questions you have.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's I think it's so important to talk about the non-negotiables, and to also I think level set, what we're willing to work with and what we're willing not to work with. Because I think, like you said, like it's so interesting. It's almost like we are attracted to people who are polar opposites, and in many ways, might have very different ways of thinking, very different styles, right? That there's this polarity there, and at the same time, on a certain level, that there's also the challenge of seeing someone's point of view, or the way that they experience reality is very different. So that can create more friction and more conflict. So it's just like this interesting kind of like hilarious joke,
Mm-hmm.
of a relationship, which, I agree. I think people that are too similar to us, it's not as fun. It feels more like a friendship rather than a romantic polarity.
Yeah. Well, one thing this is making me think of is the context of the relationship. So here's what I mean by that. Earlier, I mentioned that a really important quality in a potential partner, and also to kind of assess yourself by, is your willingness to grow and develop, your openness. And you could expand that to the point of saying, my top priority is awareness, is being, is openness, whatever word we have for that thing that we are, beyond personality and our identities. And if that is like the highest value of the relationship inside which the relationship happens, it will be much easier to then deal with the personality conflicts. Like, for example, when Erwan and I got married, we had these three levels. It was illustrated in our rings, our wedding bands. I have these 3 little diamonds, and he had these 3 little globes on his. And what they stood for were, first of all, the highest value of our marriage, the context of it is awakening, awakeness, being. That's who we are, and that's the context. The second level is our romantic, masculine, feminine dynamic. And then the third is us as identities, Alicia, Erwan, people with our patterns and things like that. So it's nice when you have that highest value, whatever that value is. Maybe you're a couple and you're together because you both are like, okay, climate change, like we are changing the world, and like your careers are about that, or your passions or your hobbies, and you're both like, that is what we're doing. I'm not like excluding romance, but you've got some kind of high value that's together. When you have something bigger than yourself in the relationship, and then the relationship happening inside of that, conflicts are much easier to deal with. So I can clarify if that isn't clear, but it's what makes me, it is whatever you said before I said that really made me think of that.
I really appreciate that comment because I think a lot of people who are in relationships now, or I think maybe the consensus reality of relationships now are focused on that third piece, which is the personality, and the personality conflicts. And that's kind of what people think about. And everything else is sort of maybe on the periphery. But I love that there's a hierarchy in the way that you're thinking about this, where it's like, and I've heard this described, almost like as like the spiritual piece of the relationship. Like you're really together to help each other evolve spiritually through some kind of whatever, what if that's a creative purpose or that's our individual purposes being mirrored, or catalyzed within each other. And I love that the second piece, which I have not thought about, but the masculine feminine polarity, like recognizing that there is this is the fundamental difference between a romantic relationship and every other relationship in your life, right? And so, and that I think why it's so, in some ways, it can be so contentious, or there can be tension, right? Because there's that layer of the polarity. So I love the way that you've structured this model. It's great. Well, I have so many more questions, but I actually want to switch gears. Unless you have a comment to make specifically on what I just shared, but I wanted to switch and talk a little bit about Tantra.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, so the last thing I'll say before we get into Tantra is what you just said about the tension. That's very, very important because, I mean, this is a whole other topic, but I'll try to just bottom line it is that, if in your romantic relationship, most people, not all, but most people get together because they have the hots for that person at some point, right? They're attracted. There's that yum, that juicy, that chemistry. And it gets usually in the beginning, it gets expressed, more, and then it tends to wane. And if that sensual energy, romantic exchange is not released and enjoyed in the relationship, and that can be in a variety of ways, flirting and touching or, sex or everything in between, there's frustration and tension, like literally, especially in the woman's body. Like this very inherent part of us is not being seen, felt, enjoyed. And there's literal tension. And then that can lead to the man kind of feeling just iffy and cranky, and then, bickering. And it's like about the laundry, but it's really not about that, And so it's really, in my experience, very important to address the chemistry and the sensual connection between the couple for fun, but also, a lot less bickering goes on.
Fascinating. I love that. Yeah, and I think that this idea of this the release of the tension has to come out somewhere, and
Yes.
let it be enjoyable, right? And not
Yes.
not through conflict.
Exactly.
I love that. I also I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about Tantra, and I know we're coming at time, but want to talk a little bit about your perspective on why Tantra is kind of important in a romantic relationship, and we can get into a couple more details. But yeah, maybe we can introduce like the types of Tantra, what it means, and why you're interested in working with it.
Yes. So there's many definitions of tantra and types of tantra, and I'm not an expert in all the types of tantra. So I'm saying that up front. But I will define tantra as I see it and as we teach it, and help couples bring it into their relationship and singles bring it into their love life. And I like to keep it very simple so it's accessible, because tantra is this beautiful, very historical practice and has so much tradition and lineage connected to it, and you can really get into it. People really love some people love studying the theory and the different types and everything. It's really beautiful, has beautiful roots. I like to keep it simple and accessible for myself and others. And the way I see tantra is simply bringing together, the coming together of the spirit and the awareness, the awakening, and sexuality and pleasure that they are expressions of the same thing. There's many religious traditions that cut off sexuality, say that it's sinful or wrong or something like that. And I find that awakening and presence includes the sex center, our whole pelvic, hips, genital region. There's awakeness in there if we really feel our bodies in that area and start to learn how to not numb that area out. So it's the coming together of awareness and presence and sensual energy. And there's really lovely, very simple breathing practices to access your own connection to your sex center. There's touch practices that Erwan and I train couples in to bring awareness into the body and into the sex center. And it can be taken all the way to what we call extended orgasm, which is a clitoral stroking technique. And it is a manual stimulation technique that couples can do, or two singles, that optimally access the pleasure in the body with presence and total relaxation.
Amazing. I think for folks who want to learn more about the Davon Method and your Tantra program specifically, they could check out your website. We'll leave links for that because we don't have too much time to go into it. But I do think that there's such a disconnection to our bodies right now. And like you'd mentioned, even the breath or doing exercises where there's touch. I think most people oftentimes are just so disconnected from these kind of simple ways of being in touch with ourselves and then also being in touch with our partners. And I also had the opportunity to check out one of your sessions in San Francisco and found it very illuminating.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can talk a little bit about Tantra maybe another time, just because we don't have a lot of time to go deeper into it, but we'll just leave it at that. Maybe a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, it's a teaser.
A teaser, yeah. So Alicia, what has surprised you the most looking back on your journey of doing this work since 1995?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know if this is surprise or something that I'm just continually reminded of, which is how much we all want intimacy, connection, and pleasure, whatever that looks like, right? For many people, that's a close, intimate partner. For others, it's multiple partners. For others, it's their relationship with themselves, different at different times. But how much we crave that and how good it feels and how much resistance we can have to that, Like I've never met anybody that if they could have it how they wanted it, wouldn't want sensual pleasure of some kind, like 24/7, and that could be a glance or a lovely present conversation or touch or sex or whatever. We naturally want that.
Amazing. Amen. Amen. I love that so much. And so where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, learn more about your work, and how to sign up for some of your online courses? I know you have a lot of them.
So the best way to do that, for anybody listening that's like, yeah, I'd really love to learn more about the programs. I actually like to chat with people about that because I think the personal connection is really nice. And some people are a little intimidated by that, but for people that want to chat, our school's text number comes to me is 415-308-9580. 415-308-9580. You can set up a time to chat with me. It'll be a 15-20 minute chat. I can get to know you and what you're looking for and lay out how our programs and classes work and see what might be a fit. I'll also give you a link that people can click to set one up as well. So you have those two options. So that's the best way, really, the most direct. Otherwise, you can visit our website, which is davonmethod.com. And you can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Davon Method, where we are always posting new stuff, new videos, and things like that.
Amazing, amazing. Wonderful. And we'll include those in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time, Alicia. This is so fabulous. I feel like we just scratched the surface. So I know you have a wealth of knowledge in this subject. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Totally my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about how to thrive in conflict and create a happy relationship with the Davon Method with Alicia Davon. And you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.